My cheating wife kept joking that she would leave me for my best friend if she ever had a chance, so I packed her bag and said, "Do it now." There are moments in life when you realize that the person you've been laughing with has actually been laughing at you, that the joke you thought you were both in on was never really a joke at all. That realization doesn't come like lightning, sudden and bright and unmistakable. It comes like water damage, slow, insidious. By the time you see the stain on the ceiling, the rot has already spread through the beams. I'm standing in our bedroom right now, holding my wife's overnight bag, the leather one I bought her for our 5th anniversary. And I can hear her voice downstairs, light and musical, saying something that makes Marcus laugh. Marcus, my best friend since college. The man who was my best man at our wedding. The man who, according to my wife's increasingly frequent jokes, is apparently the upgrade model I should have been all along. Let me take you back to when this started, or rather, when I finally started paying attention. It was a Saturday in early March, one of those deceptively bright days where the sun makes promises the temperature doesn't keep. We were hosting a barbecue, me, my wife, Elena, and about a dozen friends from our circle. Marcus was there, of course. Marcus was always there. He'd been my college roommate, the guy who'd helped me move into my first apartment, who'd lent me money when I was between jobs, who'd stood beside me when Elena walked down the aisle in that dress that made her look like she was made of light. The affair, if I can call it that yet. Though we'll get to what it actually was, it hadn't started then. Or maybe it had, and I just couldn't see the architecture of it yet. The way you can't see the blueprint of a building from the inside. Elena was flipping burgers, wearing my apron because hers was in the wash. And she'd had 3 glasses of wine, not drunk, just relaxed, uninhibited. The version of Elena that said things she might normally keep filed away in the back of her mind. "You know," she said, loud enough that the conversation around the patio table stuttered to a stop. "If I'd met Marcus before I met Daniel, I probably would have married him instead." Laughter. Nervous, performative laughter from people who weren't sure if this was acceptable territory for humor. I laughed too because what else do? You laugh, you play along, you don't stand up in front of your friends and say, "Actually, that hurt." Marcus, to his credit, looked uncomfortable. He shifted in his chair, took a long pull from his beer, said something deflecting like, "Elena, you're terrible," with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. But Elena wasn't done. "No, I'm serious," she continued, gesturing with the spatula in a way that made me worry she'd fling a burger into the neighbor's yard. "Marcus has his life together. He's got the house in Maple Ridge, the Tesla, that whole CEO thing happening. Meanwhile, Daniel here is still figuring out if he wants to be a graphic designer or a freelance writer or, what was it last month? A podcast producer?" More laughter. Lighter this time, because now she'd framed it as a roast. And everyone loves a good-natured roast, right? Except roasts are supposed to be mutual. Roasts are supposed to end with affection. This one just ended. I smiled. I nodded. I said something self-deprecating about being a Renaissance man, which got a few chuckles, and then I went inside to grab more drinks from the fridge. I stood there in the kitchen, door open, cold air washing over me, and I counted to 10, then 20. Then I stopped counting and just breathed. That was the first time. The second time was 3 weeks later at Marcus's place. He was having one of his legendary dinner parties, the kind where everything is catered and the wine list reads like a university course syllabus. Elena loved these parties. She'd spend hours getting ready, trying on 4 different dresses, asking me which earrings made her look more sophisticated. We were in Marcus's living room, which he called a great room because it had those soaring ceilings and windows that made you feel like you were inside an architectural magazine. And someone had asked Elena how we met. "Oh, Daniel and I met at a coffee shop," she said. And I smiled because I loved this story. We'd both reached for the same book that someone had left on a table, a worn copy of Murakami's Norwegian Wood. And we'd laughed, and she'd said I could have it, and I'd said no, she should take it. And we'd ended up sitting there for 3 hours talking about everything and nothing. But Elena's version that night took a different turn. "We met at a coffee shop," she repeated, and honestly, I probably only said yes to a date because he was reading Murakami, and I thought, okay, at least he's not completely uncultured. She laughed. If I'd known he'd spend the next 8 years trying to write the great American novel instead of, actually making money, I might have reconsidered. The room went quiet. Someone coughed. Marcus said, "Elena, come on." But his tone was more amused than admonishing. Elena waved him off. I'm kidding. God, you're all so sensitive. Daniel knows I love him. I just also love the idea of being with someone who has their shit together, like Marcus. She raised her wine glass toward him. Now there's a man who knows what he wants and goes after it. No dithering, no, maybe I'll try this for a while and see how it feels. Just decisive action. She turned to me, smile wide and bright and somehow empty. You could learn from him, babe. I remember Marcus looking at me across the room, and there was something in his expression I couldn't quite read. Pity, guilt, or maybe just the discomfort of a man watching his friend get emotionally kneecapped in public. I excused myself to the bathroom, locked the door, sat on the edge of the bathtub and stared at the imported Italian tile, and thought about how this was supposed to be funny. Elena was funny. Her sense of humor was one of the things I'd fallen in love with. Sharp, irreverent, unafraid. But somewhere along the way, the edge of that humor had turned toward me and only me. And I couldn't figure out when the cut had become deep enough to bleed. If you've ever been in a relationship that's slowly coming apart, you know that the unraveling doesn't announce itself. There's no moment where someone says, as of today, things are different. Instead, there are accumulations. Small moments that stack like sedimentary layers until you're standing on ground that's fundamentally different from where you started. After Marcus's dinner party, I started paying attention. I started noticing that Elena brought up Marcus in conversations where he had no logical place. We'd be discussing our weekend plans, and she'd say, Marcus mentioned, well, he's going skiing in Aspen. Must be nice to afford spontaneous trips like that. We'd be watching a movie, and she'd comment, Marcus has a home theater setup. Dolby Atmos, the whole thing. This TV is fine, though. Fine, everything about our life, our home, our choices together had become fine, and Marcus, successful, polished, unattached Marcus, had become the gold standard against which I was constantly measured and found wanting. I tried talking to her about it. Gently, at first. Hey, I said one night in bed, after she'd spent 20 minutes scrolling through Marcus's Instagram and showing me photos from his trip to Japan, do you think maybe you're idealizing him a bit? She looked at me like I'd suggested the earth was flat. Idealizing? Daniel, I'm just appreciating someone who's actually achieved something with their life. Is that not allowed? It's not that, I said carefully, and it's just, sometimes it feels like you're comparing us, him and me, and I'm always coming up short in the comparison. Elena sighed, the kind of sigh that suggested I was being exhausting. You're being sensitive. I make jokes. That's what I do. If you can't handle a little teasing, that says more about your insecurity than anything about me. And there it was, the conversational aikido that turns your concern into your character flaw. I was being sensitive. I was insecure. The problem wasn't her words, but my inability to receive them with appropriate good humor. I dropped it, but I kept paying attention. In April, we went to a wedding. A college friend of mine, someone Elena had met a few times but didn't know well. Marcus was invited too because our social circles overlapped so completely that separating them would have required a surgical precision none of us possessed. Elena wore a navy dress with a slit up the thigh, and she looked stunning. She always looked stunning. That was part of what made this so confusing. Elena was beautiful, smart, funny when she wanted to be. People gravitated toward her. I'd always felt lucky that she'd chosen me, even as I was increasingly aware that she was questioning that choice. During the reception, while I was talking to the groom's brother about something forgettable, I looked across the room and saw Elena and Marcus on the dance floor. Not slow dancing, the music was upbeat, something with a heavy bass line that made conversation difficult. But they were close. Closer than friends needed to be. She was laughing at something he'd said, her hand on his arm, and he was looking down at her with an expression I'd seen on my own face in photographs from our early days together. Interest, attraction, possibility. I felt something cold settle in my chest. When the song ended, Elena came back to our table, flushed and happy, and grabbed her drink. And Marcus is such a good dancer, she announced to the table at large. Way better than you, babe. No offense. None taken, I said automatically. I mean, you try, which is sweet, she continued, but Marcus actually has rhythm and confidence. You know what confidence does for a man? Everything. Someone laughed awkwardly. Someone else changed the subject. But I sat there sweating in my suit, watching my wife's face as she glanced back toward the dance floor where Marcus was now talking to the bride's sister. And I realized something fundamental. She wasn't joking. Or if she was, the joke was on me, and she was dead serious about the punchline. May brought warmer weather and a new frequency to Elena's jokes. They were no longer occasional barbs lobbed at dinner parties. They'd become part of our daily texture, woven into mundane conversations like a pattern you couldn't unsee once you'd noticed it. Marcus texted me this article about financial planning, she'd say over breakfast. Really insightful stuff. Maybe you should read it. Marcus thinks we should invest in real estate. He's got 3 rental properties now. 3, Daniel. What do we have? This apartment and your student loans. Marcus joined this exclusive gym downtown, $300 a month. Crazy, right? But he says it's worth it for the networking alone. Meanwhile, you won't even use the $20 Planet Fitness membership you bought. I started responding less. What was there to say? She was right on the facts. Marcus did have more money, more property, more of whatever metric we were using to measure success. And I did have student loans and a mediocre gym membership I rarely used, and a creative career that paid irregularly and required me to constantly explain what I did for a living. But facts aren't truth. Facts are just data points. Truth is about context, about values, about what you've decided matters. And the truth was that Elena had decided I didn't matter as much as she'd once thought. Or maybe I'd never mattered in the way I'd believed. Maybe I'd been a placeholder all along. Someone to fill the space until someone better came along. The thought made me sick. But I couldn't stop thinking it. In late May, Marcus invited us to spend a weekend at his cabin upstate. Cabin was a grotesque understatement. It was a 4-bedroom, 3-bathroom architectural marvel with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a private lake. But Marcus called it a cabin, and because Marcus had the kind of wealth that allowed him to be humble about extravagance, everyone else called it a cabin too. Elena was ecstatic. She packed for 3 days like we were going to a resort, bringing outfits for every possible scenario: hiking, swimming, casual dinners, formal dinners, even though Marcus had explicitly said it was a relaxed weekend. Morning yoga by the lake. Why are you so excited? I asked, watching her fold a sundress with the kind of care usually reserved for heirloom china. Because it's Marcus's cabin, Daniel. Have you seen the pictures? It's gorgeous. And it's not like we can afford our own lake house anytime soon. We could if we saved, I said mildly. She laughed, actually laughed. On your income, babe, be realistic. I sat on the edge of the bed and watched her pack and wondered when we'd become people who spoke to each other this way. When had cruelty disguised as honesty become our default mode? The weekend at the cabin was predictably excruciating. Marcus was a gracious host, as always. He'd stocked the fridge with our favorite foods, set up the guest room with fresh flowers and those expensive sheets that feel like sleeping on clouds, had a whole itinerary planned that was somehow both structured and flexible. Elena was in heaven. She spent the entire first day either marveling at the house, Daniel, look at this kitchen, 6-burner stove, sub-zero fridge, can you imagine? Or sitting on the deck with Marcus, drinking wine and talking about, honestly, I'm not sure what. I was inside trying to get some work done on a design project that was already past deadline, and their laughter kept drifting through the open windows like smoke. On the second night, after a dinner that Marcus had somehow grilled to perfection, while also participating in conversation and keeping everyone's drinks filled, Elena made a toast. To Marcus, she said, raising her wine glass, for reminding us how the other half lives. Seriously, this place is incredible. You've done so well for yourself. Thanks, Elena, Marcus said, and I noticed he didn't meet my eyes. Like so well, Elena continued, and I could hear the wine in her voice now, the way it loosened her already loose filter. Sometimes I think about what life would be like if I'd made different choices. Better choices. Elena, I said quietly. She turned to me, eyebrows raised in theatrical innocence. What? I'm complimenting Marcus. That's allowed, isn't it? Or are you too insecure for me to even acknowledge when another man is successful? There it was again. My insecurity, my inadequacy, my failure to be enough. Marcus cleared his throat. It's late. I think I'm going to head to bed. You guys good with cleaning up? We're good, I said, Before Elena could insist that Marcus relax, that we'd handle it, that he'd already done so much. After he left, Elena and I stood in the kitchen, loading the dishwasher in silence. I was waiting for her to apologize, to acknowledge that she'd crossed a line, but she didn't. She just hummed quietly, like she was perfectly content. Like she hadn't just implied in front of my best friend that marrying me had been a mistake. Finally, I said, "Do you even hear yourself anymore?" She turned off the water, dried her hands on a towel that probably cost more than our entire towel set at home. What's that supposed to mean? The comments, the comparisons, the constant reminders that Marcus is better than me in every measurable way. I don't say he's better. Yes, you do. You do it all the time. And I don't know if you're trying to hurt me or if you genuinely don't realize how it sounds, but Elena, it's killing me. She stared at me for a long moment, and I thought maybe we were finally going to have the real conversation, the one beneath all the jokes and deflections. Then she smiled. You're being dramatic. I joke around. That's my personality. If you can't handle it, that sounds like a you problem. She walked out of the kitchen, left me standing there with my hands in soapy water, and went to bed in the guest room of my best friend's cabin. And I realized something sharp and clear and terrible. She wanted me to leave her. No, more than that. She wanted me to give her permission to leave me, to be the bad guy so she could be the victim, to explode so she could point to my anger as justification for whatever she'd already decided to do. I wasn't going to give her that. June arrived with the kind of heat that makes pavement shimmer and everyone irritable. Elena had started working from home more, which meant I saw her constantly. Video calls with colleagues in the spare bedroom we'd converted to an office, lunch breaks spent scrolling through her phone, evenings where she'd emerge looking simultaneously exhausted and restless. She'd also started texting Marcus more. A lot more. I know because she'd do it while we were watching TV together, her phone lighting up with his name, and she'd smile at whatever he'd sent and type back immediately, sometimes laughing at messages she didn't share with me. What's so funny? I'd ask. Just Marcus being Marcus, she'd say, like that explained anything. One night, I cracked. Not explosively, I was still too controlled for that, too aware that any show of emotion would be used against me. But I took her phone from her hand while she was mid-text and said, "Can you please, for one evening, not be in constant contact with him?" She snatched it back. "Are you serious right now? He's your best friend, Daniel. We're friends, that's allowed." Friends don't text each other 50 times a day. You're counting my texts now? That's psychotic? I'm not counting. You just said 50 times a day. That's counting. That's keeping tabs on me, like I'm some kind of prisoner. And there it was again, the reversal. The way my legitimate concern became my toxic behavior. I took a breath. Elena, I'm not trying to control you. I'm trying to tell you that this, I gestured between her phone and the space we were sitting in, feels wrong. It feels like you're more invested in your relationship with Marcus than you are with me. She stood up. Maybe that's because Marcus actually appreciates me. He listens when I talk. He doesn't make me feel guilty for wanting more out of life. More than what? Than us? More than this. I saw him gesturing around our apartment. Our perfectly nice, if not palatial, apartment. And more than struggling to make rent every month because your career doesn't actually pay the bills. More than pretending I'm fine with being married to someone who's still figuring out what he wants to be when he grows up. I felt like I'd been hit. Actually physically struck. I work, I said quietly. I work constantly. Freelancing isn't 9 to 5, but it's work. It's not the same. As what? As Marcus? As having a corner office and a 6-figure salary? Yes! She was yelling now. Yes, it's not the same, and I'm tired of pretending it doesn't matter. I'm tired of defending my marriage to my friends who have husbands with real careers. I'm tired of being married to potential instead of achievement. We stared at each other across the living room, and I could see 8 years of marriage crystallizing into this single moment of absolute honesty. She was tired of me, tired of what I represented, tired of the life we'd built together, which suddenly looked shabby compared to the life she could have had. Then why are you still here? I asked. The question hung in the air like smoke. Elena's expression shifted, softened. She came back to the couch, sat down next to me, took my hand. Because I love you, Daniel. I'm just frustrated. You have to understand, I'm not saying I want to leave you. I'm saying I want us to be better, to do better. But I'd heard what she'd said before she'd backtracked, and I couldn't unhear it. In early July, Marcus invited a group of us to go sailing. He'd just bought a boat, because of course he had, and wanted to celebrate with friends. Elena immediately said yes, already planning her outfit before I'd even responded. The day was perfect. Cloudless sky, steady wind, water the color of sapphires in jewelry store windows. Marcus handled the boat like he handled everything else, competently, confidently, making it look effortless. Elena spent most of the day in the bow, sunbathing in a bikini she'd bought specifically for this trip, occasionally calling back to Marcus to ask him sailing questions she'd never cared about before. I sat in the cockpit watching them, not jealously exactly, more like an anthropologist observing a mating ritual. The way she'd laugh too loudly at his explanations, the way she'd touch his arm when asking him to pass the sunscreen, the way Marcus would glance at me quickly, guiltily, before turning his attention to her. Around sunset, one of the other couples suggested taking a group photo. Everyone gathered at the stern, arranging themselves in that awkward way people do when trying to fit into a phone camera's frame. I was on the end. Marcus and Elena were in the middle, his arm around her shoulders because space was tight and someone said perfect and took the photo. Later, when we were back at the marina, Elena's phone buzzed with notifications. The photos had been uploaded to a group chat. I watched her scroll through them, smiling, stopping on one in particular. It was the group photo, but somehow, either through framing or fate, or just the angle of the late sun, it looked like a photo of Marcus and Elena. The rest of us were fuzzy, partially cut off, or looking away. But they were clear, centered, his arm around her, both of them smiling like they were exactly where they wanted to be. She saved it. I saw her do it. Watched her thumb hover over the heart icon, then the download button, then saw the notification that said, "Photo saved to albums." "Nice picture," I said. She glanced up, caught. "Yeah, the lighting came out well." That night, I waited until she was asleep, then carefully took her phone from the nightstand. I knew her passcode. We'd always had an open phone policy, one of those gestures of trust that was supposed to make a relationship strong. I opened her photos and found the one from the boat. She'd already set it as her lock screen. Not the group photo, not one of us together. A photo where I was barely visible, where Marcus was the focal point, where she looked happy in a way I couldn't remember seeing recently when she looked at me. I put the phone back, lay in bed staring at the ceiling, and started planning. The incident that finally broke me happened on a Tuesday. Tuesdays were usually quiet. I'd work from home, Elena would do her thing, we'd exist in parallel but separate orbits around our apartment. But this Tuesday, Marcus stopped by. "Hey man," he said when I opened the door. "I was in the neighborhood. Thought I'd see if you wanted to grab lunch." "Sure," I said, because what else was I going to say? "No, I think you're actively trying to steal my wife, so lunch seems inappropriate." We went to a deli around the corner, got sandwiches, sat outside in the heat that made the plastic chairs stick to bare skin. For a while, we just ate and made small talk about work, about the Mets, about the heat wave and whether this was just summer or proof of atmospheric collapse. Then Marcus said, "How are things with you and Elena?" I stopped mid-bite. "What do you mean?" "I mean, you guys seem tense lately, at the cabin, on the boat, just in general." "We're fine," I said automatically. Marcus nodded, but he didn't look convinced. "Look, Daniel, I need to tell you something, and I need you to know I'm telling you because we're friends, because I care about you." My stomach dropped. Here it was, the confession, the moment where he'd tell me he was in love with her, or she'd told him she was in love with him, or they'd kissed, or something worse than kissing. "Elena's been talking to me," Marcus continued, and he had the decency to look uncomfortable. "A lot. About your relationship, and about how she's feeling." "And how is she feeling?" "Frustrated, stuck, like she's outgrown where she is in life." "By where she is, you mean married to me?" "She didn't say that exactly, but that's what she meant." Marcus sighed. "I'm not trying to get in the middle of this. I'm really not. But she talks like she's trying to convince herself to stay. And man, I don't know if that's the kind of marriage you want to be in." I looked at him across the table, this person who'd been my friend for 15 years, and I saw something in his face that made everything click into place. It wasn't guilt, it was hope. He was hoping that Elena would leave me. Maybe not hoping actively, not wishing for it, but the possibility was there in his eyes, in the careful way he was choosing his words. He wanted her, and she knew it. And she was using both of us, him as motivation, me as a safety net. Thanks for the heads up, I said. My voice sounded strange, distant. I appreciate you telling me. We finished lunch, walked back. Marcus gave me one of those half hugs men do, said he was there if I needed to talk, and left. I went upstairs to find Elena at her computer, video call in progress, gesturing animatedly about some project or presentation or crisis that required her attention. I waited until she was done, made coffee, sat down at the kitchen table with a notepad, and started doing something I should have done months ago. I started documenting every comment, every joke, every comparison, every time she'd made me feel small, inadequate, insufficient. I wrote them down, dated them as best as I could remember, noted who was present to witness them. The list was long, longer than I'd expected. Seeing it all compiled like that in stark black ink on white paper made something crystallize in my chest. This wasn't salvageable. This marriage, this relationship, this daily erosion of my self-worth disguised as banter. It was over. Maybe it had been over for months and I'd been too stubborn or too hopeful or too afraid to acknowledge it. But I was acknowledging it now. Marcus threw a 4th of July party. Of course he did. In the backyard of his Maple Ridge house, with catering and a bartender and a whole setup for watching fireworks that probably violated several local ordinances, but looked spectacular. Elena spent a week planning her outfit. She bought a new dress, white with red accents, patriotic but sexy, the kind of thing that required specific undergarments and confidence. She looked incredible. She always looked incredible. We drove to Marcus's place in near silence, the kind of quiet that feels like a physical presence in the car. I parked on the street because the driveway was already full of expensive vehicles, and Elena checked her makeup in the visor mirror one more time before we got out. "You seem tense," she said. "Just tired." "Well, try to be social, okay? Don't spend the whole night being weird and moody." I didn't respond. We walked to the backyard where music was already playing and people were already drinking, and Marcus was standing by the grill wearing an apron that said "Kiss the Cook," an embroidered script that had probably cost more than my entire outfit. "Daniel, Elena!" He waved us over, handed us drinks, gave Elena a hug that lasted 2 seconds longer than it needed to. "You look amazing." "Thanks," Elena said, and she did this thing with her hair, tucked it behind her ear, smiled up at him, that I'd seen 1,000 times in our early dating days. But never recently. Not with me. The party progressed. I talked to people I vaguely knew, laughed at jokes I didn't find funny, drank more than I meant to. Elena orbited Marcus like a moon around a planet, finding reasons to be near him, touching his arm when she laughed, asking him questions about the grill, the bartender, the sound system, the landscaping. Around 9, when the sky was finally dark enough for fireworks, everyone gathered on the lawn. Someone had spread out blankets. Marcus had somehow procured professional-grade fireworks, the kind that required permits and a safe distance and probably a waiver. Elena sat down on one of the blankets. Marcus sat next to her. There was space for me, but it required squeezing in, making myself small, intruding on their bubble. I sat down on a different blanket. Someone noticed. "Daniel, don't you want to sit with your wife?" "I'm good here," I said. "Better view." The fireworks started. They were spectacular. Chrysanthemums of light in red and white and blue, crackling palm trees, that finale of rapid-fire bursts that made everyone gasp and applaud. I watched them. But I also watched Elena and Marcus. The way her head tilted toward his when he said something. The way his hand was on the blanket, inches from hers, not touching but close enough that the intention was clear. When the fireworks ended and everyone was standing, brushing grass off their clothes, gathering belongings, Elena made her way over to me. "That was incredible," she said. "Yeah. You okay? You've been acting weird all night." "I'm fine." She studied my face, and for a moment I thought maybe she'd see it, the end of us, written in my expression like subtitles. But she just shrugged. "Whatever, I'm going to help Marcus clean up. You can head to the car if you want." I did. I walked to the car, sat in the driver's seat, and waited. 45 minutes later, Elena emerged from the house, laughing at something, Marcus beside her. with his hand on her lower back. Casual, comfortable, possessive. They said their goodbyes. She got in the car. We drove home in silence. That night, lying in bed, Elena turned to me and said, "You know, if Marcus ever actually made a move, I don't know what I'd do." My heart stopped. What? I'm just saying, he's a good guy, successful, attentive, and sometimes I wonder what it would be like if we'd gotten together instead of you and me. She said it lightly, like it was a thought experiment, like she was commenting on the weather. Are you serious right now? I asked. Oh, come on. You can't tell me you've never thought about what it would be like to be with someone else. That's normal. That's human. There's thinking about it, I said slowly. And there's saying it out loud to your spouse. Elena laughed. God, you're so sensitive. I'm joking, Daniel. Obviously, I'm joking. Marcus is your best friend. I would never actually do anything. The actually hung in the air like poison. But if he wasn't your best friend, I pressed. She was quiet for a moment. Then, I don't know, maybe. I lay there in the dark, listening to her breathing, even out as she fell asleep. And I realized that this moment, this confession disguised as a joke, was the thing I'd been waiting for, the proof, the undeniable evidence that we were done. In the morning, I started packing her bag. The next few weeks were a masterclass in passive-aggressive warfare. Elena continued making her jokes, but now she was watching me when she made them, like she was testing to see how much more I could take. Marcus thinks we should get a financial advisor, she said over breakfast one morning, not looking up from her phone. He recommended someone who helped him diversify his portfolio. I told him we could barely afford to diversify our grocery list. Laughter, her own laughter, at her own joke. I ate my cereal and said nothing. You know what Marcus told me yesterday? She continued, switching tactics since I wasn't biting. He said he admires our marriage. Can you believe that? A successful, attractive, wealthy single man admires our marriage. What do you think he admires about it, Daniel? The passion? The financial stability? The riveting conversations? Elena, I said quietly, you're being cruel. I'm being honest. There's a difference. No, you're being cruel and calling it honesty. There's a difference. She set down her phone, gave me her full attention for the first time in days. You want to know what's cruel? Cruel is making me feel guilty for wanting more. Cruel is making me the bad guy because I'm not satisfied with mediocrity. Cruel is expecting me to just smile and pretend like everything is fine when it's not. Then leave, I said. The words were out before I'd fully thought them through, but once they were in the air, I didn't want to take them back. Elena stared at me. What? If you're this unhappy, if I'm this disappointing, if Marcus is this much better, leave. Go be with him. I didn't say I wanted to leave. You say it every day, in every comment, every comparison, every joke. You want out, so get out. She stood up, chair scraping against the floor. You don't get to make this my fault. You don't get to twist this around like I'm the problem. You're the one who can't handle a little honest feedback. You're the one who's too insecure to let me have friends. Marcus isn't your friend. Or if he is, you're treating him like something else. And you're treating me like an inconvenience you're stuck with until something better comes along. That's not fair. It's completely fair. It's the truth. The same truth you keep insisting you're just being honest about. We stared at each other across the kitchen table, 8 years of marriage, compressed into this single moment of absolute clarity. Then Elena's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, Marcus no doubt, and something in her expression shifted, softened. She picked up the phone, read the message, typed back. When she looked up at me again, her face was composed, neutral. I'm going out, she said. I need some air. Where? Does it matter? Yes. Fine. I'm meeting Marcus for coffee. He's a good listener. Unlike some people. She grabbed her purse and left. I heard the apartment door close, heard her footsteps fade down the hallway, heard the elevator ding and descend. I sat alone in the kitchen for a long time, listening to the silence, and then I got to work. I want to be clear about something. I'm not proud of what I did next. Or maybe I am. I haven't fully processed the ethics of it yet. But I knew that if I was going to end this marriage, and at this point, I was certain that was the only option left, I needed to do it on my terms, with my dignity intact, and with enough evidence that Elena couldn't rewrite history and make me the villain. Because that's what people like Elena do. They control the narrative. They make themselves the victim of your inadequacies, the martyr, suffering through your failures. the saint who tried so hard to make it work but just couldn't overcome your fundamental flaws. I wasn't going to let that happen. First, I backed up every message, every email, every text conversation between Elena and Marcus that I could access. We had a shared iCloud account, that open phone policy again, so it wasn't difficult. I downloaded the conversations to an encrypted drive, organized them by date, highlighted particularly damning exchanges. There were a lot of those messages about me. Daniel's having another existential crisis about his career. So exhausting. Messages about Marcus. I wish I'd met you first. Life would be so different. Messages about their relationship. I know we're just friends, but sometimes I wonder what if. And Marcus's responses, which were careful, always slightly deflecting, never quite reciprocating, but never shutting her down either. Elena, you know I care about you, but Daniel's my friend. Classic. He wanted her, but he wanted to maintain plausible deniability. He wanted to be the good guy who resisted temptation, while still leaving the door open for possibility. Second, I documented our finances, printed out bank statements, credit card bills, loan documentation. I wanted a clear picture of where we stood financially, both for the inevitable divorce proceedings and to counter the narrative Elena had built about me being a financial burden. Yes, I made less than Marcus, but I paid my share of bills. I contributed to our household. I wasn't the deadbeat she'd been implying I was. Third, I started talking to a lawyer, quietly, discreetly. A referral from a colleague who'd gone through a divorce 2 years ago. I explained the situation, the emotional affair, if not a physical one, the constant belittling, the way my wife had been openly fantasizing about leaving me for my best friend. Do you want to fight for this marriage? The lawyer asked. No, I said, I want to end it with as little damage as possible. Define damage. I want her out of my life. I want to split assets fairly, and I want her to understand that I'm not the weak, pathetic person she's made me out to be. The lawyer nodded. We can work with that. Fourth, and most importantly, I started getting my own life in order. I reached out to old friends I'd neglected while trying to prop up my failing marriage. I took on more freelance work, built up my client roster, started seeing a therapist to process what I'd been through. I worked out more, not to compete with Marcus, but because physical activity was the only thing that quieted the constant loop of Elena's voice in my head. I got stronger, in every sense of the word, and I waited for the right moment. The moment came on a Saturday in late July. One of those oppressively hot days when the city smells like garbage and desperation and everyone's temper is approximately 30 seconds from boiling over. Elena had gone to brunch with friends, or so she said. I'd stopped taking her words at face value weeks ago. I was home, working on a logo design for a tech startup, when my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. You should see this. Attached was a photo, clearly taken from inside a restaurant. Elena and Marcus, sitting in a booth close together. His hand was on the table, covering hers. She was leaning in, saying something, and the expression on her face was one I'd seen before, in our early dating photos, in our wedding album, in pictures from a time when she'd looked at me that way. Intimate, tender, full of possibility. Who is this? I texted back. Someone who thought you should know. They've been here for 2 hours. Definitely not just friends. Thanks, I wrote, and stared at the photo until the screen went dark. I could have confronted her, could have driven to the restaurant, made a scene, demanded explanations. That's what the old Daniel would have done. The one who still believed in fighting for the marriage, in grand gestures and emotional confrontations that resolve things. But I wasn't that Daniel anymore. Instead, I finished my work, sent the logo files to the client, invoiced them, made myself lunch, did a load of laundry, acted like a person whose world wasn't actively disintegrating around him. Elena came home around 4, flushed and happy, claiming the brunch had gone long because everyone was having such a good time. How was your day? She asked, dropping her purse on the couch. Productive, I said. Got a lot done. Good, I'm going to take a shower. While she was in the bathroom, I opened her phone, passcode unchanged because why would she bother protecting something she didn't think I'd ever check? And found the text thread with Marcus. The messages from today were a symphony of plausible deniability. Elena, brunch was fun. Thanks for meeting me. Marcus, anytime, you know I'm always here. Elena, I needed that. Things have been rough at home. Marcus, I know, I'm sorry, you deserve better. Elena, sometimes I think I should just do it. Just leave. Marcus, that's a big decision. Make sure it's what you really want. Elena, I know what I want, I'm just scared. Marcus, don't be, you're stronger than you think. I took screenshots, added them to the folder on my encrypted drive, put her phone back exactly where she'd left it. When Elena came out of the shower, wrapped in a towel with her hair dripping on the hardwood floor we'd refinished together 2 years ago, I looked at her and felt nothing. Not anger, not betrayal, not even sadness. Just a profound sense of finality. I'm thinking of ordering Thai food, she said. You want your usual? Sure. We ate on the couch, watching some Netflix show neither of us cared about, existing in the same space but occupying completely different realities. Hers, where she was biding her time, working up the courage to blow up our marriage. Mine, where I'd already ended it, and I was just waiting for her to catch up. Before I made my final move, I needed to talk to Marcus. Not to save the friendship, that was long dead, killed by his unwillingness to set boundaries and his obvious desire for my wife, but because I needed him to understand what was about to happen and why. I called him on a Tuesday afternoon when I knew Elena was at her office for a meeting she couldn't video call from home. Hey man, Marcus answered, and I could hear confusion in his voice. I never called. We texted or Elena arranged group hangouts, but I never initiated contact anymore. We need to talk, I said, in person, today. Sure, is everything okay? No, but it will be. We met at a coffee shop nowhere near Marcus's usual haunts or my apartment. Neutral territory, public, enough that neither of us would cause a scene. He arrived 10 minutes late, looking concerned and slightly guilty, which was at least an honest emotion. What's going on? He asked, sitting down across from me with a complicated coffee drink that had multiple modifiers and cost more than most people's lunch. I slid my phone across the table. On the screen was the photo from the restaurant, him and Elena, hands touching, intimacy written in body language. Marcus went pale. Daniel, I'm not angry, I said, which was true. I'm past anger. I'm just done. Nothing happened, I swear. We're just friends. Don't insult me with that. You've been actively pursuing my wife for months. Slow motion, plausibly deniable pursuit, but pursuit nonetheless. And she's been encouraging it, using you as a benchmark for my inadequacy, using the possibility of you as motivation to leave me. I never meant, yes, you did. You absolutely did. Maybe you didn't plan it. Maybe you didn't wake up one day and decide to torpedo your best friend's marriage. But you wanted her. And when she started showing interest, you didn't shut it down. You left the door open. You validated her complaints about me. You positioned yourself as the alternative she should be considering. Marcus stared at his expensive coffee. I'm sorry. I don't want your apology. I want you to understand that when Elena leaves me, and she's going to, probably very soon, you're not getting the person you think you are. You're getting someone who's been systematically cruel to her husband for months. Someone who needs external validation so badly that she'll sabotage a decent relationship in pursuit of an idealized fantasy. As someone who turns her dissatisfaction inward until it becomes everyone else's fault. That's not fair, Marcus said quietly. You don't know what she's been going through. Actually, I do. Better than you. I've been living it. And here's what's going to happen. Elena's going to leave me. She'll frame it as her finally getting the courage to escape an unfulfilling marriage. You'll comfort her. Maybe you'll date. Maybe you'll even be happy for a while. I lean forward. But eventually she'll do to you what she did to me. She'll find your flaws, the ways you don't measure up to whatever impossible standard she set. And she'll start making jokes, little comments, comparisons to some other man who has more, does more, is more, and you'll sit there wondering when you became inadequate, when you stopped being enough. You're being unfair to her. I'm being accurate, and you'll see it eventually. But by then, I'll be long gone, building a life with someone who doesn't need me to be perfect to be valued. I stood up. I'm telling you this because we were friends once, and because I want you to know that you didn't win anything. You just inherited my problem. Marcus looked up at me, and for a moment I saw something crack in his composure. Doubt, maybe, or recognition. What are you going to do? What I should have done months ago, I said. I'm going to let her go. The next Friday, Elena came home from work with an energy I'd seen before. The manic brightness that meant she'd made a decision and was working up to announcing it. We had dinner. pasta with a pre-made sauce because neither of us had the energy for anything elaborate anymore. We ate mostly in silence, the TV playing something neither of us watched. Then Elena said, I think we should talk. Okay, she took a breath. I'm not happy, Daniel. I haven't been happy for a while. And I think maybe we got married too young. Maybe we didn't know what we really wanted. Go on. I'm not saying you're a bad person. You're not. You're a good guy. Just maybe not the right guy for me. Not anymore. I set down my fork. Are you asking for a divorce? I'm saying I think we should consider it. Consider taking a break. Figuring out if this is really what we both want. And by figuring out, you mean you want to see what it's like to be with Marcus. Her face flushed. This isn't about Marcus. Elena, stop. Please, it's always been about Marcus. For months, you've been building him up as this ideal while tearing me down. You've been testing the waters, seeing if he'd reciprocate, dropping hints about leaving me. You've been emotionally cheating. And the only reason it hasn't become physically cheating is because he's been too smart to take the bait while we're still married. That's not true. It is true. And you know it is, so let's just be honest for once. I stood up. You want to be with Marcus? You want to see if the grass is greener with the successful, wealthy, perfect man? Fine, do it. Elena stared at me. What? I'm giving you permission. Go, be with him. See if he's everything you've been fantasizing about. Daniel, you're being crazy. No, I'm being clear. You've been making jokes about leaving me for him for months. You've been saying, if Marcus ever made a move, and I wonder what it would be like, and treating me like I'm some kind of consolation prize you're stuck with, so I'm calling your bluff. I walked to the bedroom, pulled out the bag I'd packed for her, the leather one from our 5th anniversary, filled with clothes and toiletries and the essentials she'd need. What are you doing? Elena followed me, her voice rising. What you've been wanting me to do for months. I'm letting you go, no fight, no drama, no making you the bad guy. You want out? You're out. I carried the bag to the front door, set it down. The guest room at Marcus's place has that comfortable bed. I'm sure he'll be happy to take you in. You can't just kick me out. I'm not kicking you out. I'm granting your wish. You said if Marcus ever gave you a chance, you didn't know what you'd do. Well, here's your chance. Take it. Elena's eyes were wide, panicked. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. She was supposed to be the one making the decision, controlling the narrative, positioning herself as the brave one leaving a dead relationship. I didn't mean, I was joking. No, you weren't, and we both know it. You were testing me, seeing how much you could push before I'd snap, so you could point to my reaction as justification. But I'm not going to snap. I'm just going to open the door. I did. The hallway stretched out beyond our apartment, leading to elevators, to the street, to whatever life she'd been imagining existed outside our marriage. Daniel, please, can we just talk about this? We've been talking about it for months. Through every joke, every comparison, every time you made me feel like I wasn't enough, you've been telling me you wanted out. I'm finally listening. What if I don't want to go? I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw panic where I'd expected relief. Because this was real now. Not a fantasy, not a joke, not a safe hypothetical. This was a choice with consequences. Then you don't go, I said quietly. But if you stay, things change. No more jokes about Marcus, no more constant comparisons, no more emotional affairs disguised as friendship. We go to counseling, we actually work on this marriage, or we end it honestly. But I'm done being your backup plan while you fantasize about something better. Elena stood in the doorway, literally on the threshold, and I could see her mind working. She looked at her bag, at me, at her phone, probably thinking about Marcus. I need time to think, she finally said. Take all the time you need, but take it somewhere else. Tonight, you're choosing. You walk out that door and we're done. You stay and we start over. But I need you to choose. She stared at me for a long moment. Then she picked up her bag. I'm going to stay with my sister, she said. Not Marcus, her sister, still maintaining the narrative that this was about our marriage, not about him. Sure you are, I said. I am. And I'm going to think about what I want. What's best for both of us? She walked out. I closed the door, locked it. And then I stood there in the sudden silence of the apartment, listening to the absence of her. And I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Relief. Elena did go to her sister's. I know because her sister called me 2 hours later, confused and concerned, asking what had happened. I gave her the abbreviated version. Elena and I were having problems. She'd left. We needed space to figure things out. She said you kicked her out, her sister said. I gave her a choice. She chose to leave. That's not how she's telling it. I'm sure it's not. Elena's sister, Monica, who'd always been kind to me, who'd been one of my allies in the family, sighed. Daniel, what really happened? So I told her. Not everything, not the screenshots or the documented evidence or the lawyer consultations, but the basic truth. Elena had been emotionally involved with Marcus for months, had been systematically tearing me down while building him up, had been making jokes about leaving me for him until I'd finally called her bluff. Oh, Monica said quietly, but I was afraid it was something like that. You knew? I suspected. She's been talking about Marcus a lot lately, and she's been different, critical, dissatisfied. I thought maybe she was going through something, but I didn't realize it had gotten this bad. It got bad, I confirmed. What are you going to do? I'm going to file for divorce. Quietly, cleanly, as amicably as the situation allows, and I'm going to move on with my life. I'm sorry, Daniel. For what it's worth, I think she's making a mistake. Maybe. Or maybe we both made a mistake years ago and we're just finally acknowledging it. After I hung up with Monica, I sat in the quiet apartment and processed what I'd done. I'd ended my marriage, definitively, dramatically, in a way that couldn't be walked back or explained away. And the strangest part was that I felt okay. Not happy, not devastated, just okay. Like I'd been carrying something heavy for so long that I'd forgotten what it felt like to set it down. My phone buzzed. Marcus. Elena called me. She's upset. What did you do? I stared at the message for a long moment, then typed back, I let her go, like you've been hoping I would. You're welcome. I blocked his number. Elena stayed at her sister's for 3 days. During that time, she texted me frequently, long messages that alternated between apologetic and accusatory, between, I never meant to hurt you and you overreacted. I responded minimally. I understand. Take your time. Let me know when you want to discuss logistics. On the 4th day, she came to the apartment to get more of her things. I'd made sure I had a friend there, Jason from my weekly basketball game, a guy who knew the situation and whose presence would keep things civil. Elena looked tired, thinner somehow, like the stress had physically diminished her. She avoided eye contact as she packed a suitcase with clothes, toiletries, her laptop. We should talk, she said. Okay. Not here. Can we go somewhere? Just us? I glanced at Jason, who nodded. I'll wait here. Elena and I went to a coffee shop around the corner, not the one Marcus and I had met at, but a different one, new territory. We ordered drinks we didn't want and sat at a table by the window. I'm sorry, Elena said, for the jokes, for how I made you feel. I didn't realize, she trailed off. Didn't realize what? I prompted. How much it hurt you? I thought I was just blowing off steam, being honest about my frustrations. I didn't think you were taking it seriously. Elena, you told me multiple times that you wished you'd married Marcus instead of me. You said you didn't know what you'd do if he made a move. You changed your lock screen to a photo where I was barely visible and he was the focal point. How was I supposed to take that? I know, I was wrong and I was being selfish and cruel and I'm sorry. I sipped my coffee. It was too hot and too bitter and I burned my tongue. Are you sleeping with him? I asked. What? No, Daniel, I swear, nothing physical has happened, but you want it to. She was quiet. That's what I thought, I said. It's not that simple. Marcus he's safe, he's successful. He represents a version of life that feels more stable, but it doesn't mean I don't love you. Yes, it does. Maybe you love the memory of me, the person you thought I'd become, but you don't love the actual me. The me who's a freelancer with irregular income and no corner office and no luxury cabin. You love an idea of what I could be, and you resent the reality of what I am. Elena's eyes filled with tears. That's not fair. It's completely fair. And Elena, here's the thing. Even if I suddenly became everything you wanted, got a corporate job, made 6 figures, bought a house in Maple Ridge, it still wouldn't be enough. Because the problem isn't my job or my income or my lack of a boat. The problem is that you've built up this fantasy of what life should look like. And you're angry at me for not being able to make it real. So what are you saying? I'm saying we're done. I'm filing for divorce. We'll split assets fairly and we'll both move on. Just like that. You're not going to fight for us? I looked at her across the table. This woman I'd loved for 8 years, and I felt a deep, profound sadness. Not for the end of the marriage, but for how thoroughly we'd destroyed each other in the process of maintaining it. I've been fighting for us for months, I said quietly. Every time you made a joke and I smiled, every time you compared me to Marcus and I tried to be better, every time you made me feel small and I convinced myself you didn't mean it. I've been fighting alone, and I'm tired. Elena cried, actual tears streaming down her face in the middle of the coffee shop while other patrons pretended not to notice. And I felt nothing, or not nothing. I felt compassion, the kind you have for someone who's suffering, but not the desperate need to fix it that I'd have felt months ago. What about counseling? She asked. We could try counseling. We could, but Elena, be honest. Do you want to fix this marriage, or do you just not want to be the bad guy who ended it? She didn't answer. That was answer enough. I filed for divorce on a Wednesday. The lawyer's office was in a bland corporate building downtown, the kind of place that smells like cleaning products and recycled air. I filled out paperwork, signed documents, listened to the lawyer explain the process in the kind of detached, professional tone that made it clear she'd done this hundreds of times. Given that there are no children and you're willing to split assets equitably, this should be straightforward, she said. In New York, you can file for a no-fault divorce, citing irretrievable breakdown for at least 6 months. We'll need to serve Elena, and she'll have a chance to respond, but if she doesn't contest, we can move relatively quickly. How quickly? 6 to 8 months, barring complications. 6 to 8 months. In that time, Elena would move on with Marcus, or she wouldn't. I'd build my freelance business into something more stable, or I wouldn't. We'd process the end of our marriage, or we'd just exist in separate spaces until the law made it official. Let's do it, I said. The lawyer nodded and started pulling files. As she worked, she said conversationally, you seem calmer than most people at this stage. Usually there's more emotion. I processed the emotion months ago, I said. This is just paperwork. That's probably healthier, she said. Divorce is easier when it's business rather than warfare. But, of course, it couldn't be just business. Elena was served the divorce papers on a Friday afternoon. I know because she called me immediately, her voice high and sharp with panic. You actually filed? You really did it? Yes. I thought we were taking time to think. You were taking time to think. I'd already thought. I'm done, Elena. This is happening. You can't just decide this unilaterally. Actually, I can. That's how no-fault divorce works. But if you want to contest it, you're welcome to. We'll spend more money on lawyers, drag this out longer, make it uglier. Or we can be adults, split things fairly, and move on. Silence on the other end. Then, I want the apartment. No. It's only fair. Fair would be selling it and splitting the proceeds, which is what we're going to do. Everything else, furniture, personal items, whatever, we'll divide reasonably. But I'm not giving you the apartment, so you have a comfortable place to live while you date my ex-best friend. This isn't about Marcus. Elena, stop, please. It's always been about Marcus. Own it. At least give me the respect of honesty. Another silence. Then quietly, I think I might love him. There it was. The truth, finally spoken aloud. Then I hope you're happy together, I said, and found that I meant it. Not in a magnanimous I'm so evolved I wish them well way, but in a genuine hope that she'd find whatever she was looking for, so she'd stop searching for it in ways that destroyed other people. Daniel, I have to go. Have your lawyer contact mine about the apartment and the assets. Let's keep this as clean as possible. I hung up. That night I sat in the apartment, our apartment soon to be sold, and allowed myself to feel everything I'd been holding back. The anger, the betrayal, the grief for the life we'd planned but would never live. The embarrassment of having my marriage fall apart while my best friend stood waiting in the wings. I let myself feel it all. And then I let it go. Despite blocking his number, Marcus found ways to reach out. Email, social media. Eventually, he just showed up at my apartment on a Sunday morning, knocking loud enough that I couldn't pretend not to be home. I opened the door. We need to talk, he said. No, we don't. Daniel, please, just hear me out. Against my better judgment, I let him in. He stood in the living room, looking around at the space he'd been in dozens of times before, now awkward and uncomfortable in his own skin. I'm sorry. he started. I don't want your apology. I need to say it anyway. I never meant for this to happen. I never wanted to come between you and Elena. But you did. Not actively. Maybe not consciously, but you did. You were the comparison point she used to find me inadequate. You were the fantasy she chased while letting our marriage die. You were the backup plan. That's not fair to me. Isn't it? Marcus, think about your behavior. How many times did Elena complain to you about me and you validated those complaints? How many times did she joke about wishing she'd married you and you didn't shut it down? How many times did you position yourself as the better option? Marcus looked uncomfortable. I was just being a good friend, listening, being supportive. To her. You were being a good friend to her. But what about me? When were you a good friend to me? When did you tell her, Elena, you're being unfair to Daniel? When did you set boundaries and say, I'm not comfortable being used as a benchmark against my best friend? I didn't know how to handle it. You handled it by leaving the door open, by being available, by being the answer to every what if she asked herself about our marriage. Marcus sat down on the couch heavily, like his legs had given out. You're right, I did all of that. And I'm sorry, but Daniel, you have to understand, I didn't pursue her. She pursued me, and I tried to keep it appropriate. I tried to maintain boundaries. But you didn't maintain them well enough. And now here we are, me filing for divorce, Elena planning a future with you, our friendship destroyed. Was it worth it? He looked up at me. I don't know yet. The honesty of it surprised me. At least he wasn't pretending this was some tragic accident no one could have prevented. Are you going to date her? I asked. I don't know. Probably. Eventually. Daniel, she's amazing, smart and funny and cruel. Don't forget cruel. She's amazing and smart and funny and cruel. She'll be cruel to you too, eventually. When you stop being perfect, when the shine wears off and you become just another human with flaws. Maybe, Marcus said. Or maybe it'll be different with us. Maybe, I agreed. But probably not. We sat in silence for a while. Then Marcus said, Can I ask you something? Sure. Why didn't you fight harder? Why did you just let her go? I thought about that, about the moment I'd handed Elena her bag and told her to take it. Because, I said slowly, I realized that I was fighting for something that was already gone. The Elena I married, the woman I fell in love with, she didn't exist anymore. Or maybe she'd never existed the way I thought she did. And the version that did exist didn't want me. She wanted an idea of me that I could never live up to. So what was I fighting for? The privilege of being constantly found inadequate? The honor of being someone's consolation prize? That's not how she saw you. Yes, it was. And Marcus, I need you to hear this. You didn't win anything. You inherited my problem. And when she starts treating you the way she treated me, I won't be there to warn you. I won't be there to say, I told you so. I'll be long gone, building a life with someone who doesn't need me to be perfect to be loved. Marcus stood up. I hope you find that. Genuinely. You deserve it. So do you, Vishy, I said. But I don't think you're going to find it with Elena. He left. I locked the door behind him and went back to my Sunday, and I didn't think about him again for a very long time. Divorce, I learned, is a process of unraveling. Not just legally, though there was plenty of that, with lawyers and paperwork and negotiations over who got the good cookware, but emotionally, psychologically, identity-wise. For 8 years, I'd been half of Daniel and Elena. We were a unit, a team, a matched set at dinner parties and family gatherings. People knew us as a couple. Our identities were intertwined like vines. Now I had to figure out who I was as just Daniel. I threw myself into work, took on every client I could find, built my portfolio, started charging what I was actually worth instead of underpricing myself out of insecurity. Within 3 months, I was making more than I had in the entire previous year. Turned out, when you're not constantly being told you're inadequate, you start believing in your own value. I reconnected with friends I'd neglected. Guys from college, coworkers from past jobs, people I'd lost touch with because married life had consumed all my social energy. We played basketball, grabbed beers, had conversations that had nothing to do with my failed marriage. I started dating, casually at first, just to remember what it felt like to have someone look at me with interest instead of disappointment. Nothing serious, just coffee dates and movie nights and kisses that didn't carry 8 years of baggage. And I went to therapy every week, sitting in a comfortable chair in an office that smelled like lavender, talking to a woman named Dr. Patterson who asked probing questions and didn't let me get away with easy answers. Why do you think you accepted Elena's behavior for so long? She asked one session. I loved her. I wanted to make it work. That's what you loved. But why did you accept being treated poorly? I thought about that because I thought it was normal. Because I thought all marriages had this dynamic where one person was more successful and the other had to prove their worth. And now? Now I know that's bullshit. A real partner doesn't make you feel like you have to earn their respect every day. They give it freely because they chose you. Dr. Patterson smiled. That's growth. It was. Slow, painful growth. Like a bone healing after a bad break, but growth nonetheless. I found out about Elena and Marcus from social media, which is the modern equivalent of hearing gossip through the grapevine. Someone from our old friend group posted a photo from a dinner party. Marcus and Elena, sitting close, his arm around her shoulders, both smiling like they'd won the lottery. The caption, "Some people are just meant to be together." I stared at the photo for a long time. Analyzed their body language, their expressions, looking for signs of what I knew would eventually come. The cracks, the disappointment, the realization that fantasy and reality are different things. But all I saw was two people who looked happy. And the strangest thing happened, I felt okay about it. Not happy exactly. There was still a bitter edge to seeing them together, knowing that my best friend and my ex-wife had gotten exactly what they wanted. But underneath the bitterness was something that felt like relief. They were together. The thing that had been hanging over my marriage for months had finally happened. The tension was resolved. I commented on the photo. Congrats. Wish you both the best. And I meant it, or at least I was trying to mean it. Several people messaged me privately. Are you okay? This must be so hard for you. I can't believe they're together already. I responded to each with some variation of, I'm fine, really. Elena and I were done long before the divorce papers. I'm glad she's happy. Whether I was lying or not, I wasn't entirely sure, but saying it out loud helped me believe it. The divorce was finalized in January, and I got the notification from my lawyer via email, the official document attached as a PDF, making our marriage's end feel somehow too easy, too impersonal. I downloaded the document, read through the legal language that reduced 8 years to a few pages of assets divided, debts assigned, a marriage irretrievably broken for at least 6 months. Then I closed the laptop and went for a run. It was cold, that particular kind of January cold that makes your lungs ache and your face go numb. But I ran anyway, through the park near my new apartment, smaller than the one Elena and I had shared, but mine alone, past the dog walkers and the other runners and the people going about their lives. I thought about Elena, about Marcus, about the life we'd built and dismantled, about the jokes that weren't jokes and the moment I'd finally called the bluff. And I realized something. I'd won. Not in the sense of getting revenge or proving a point or watching them crash and burn, but in the sense that I'd gotten my life back. I'd stopped accepting crumbs of affection disguised as humor. I'd stopped measuring my worth against someone else's bank account. I'd stopped being small to make someone else comfortable. I'd grown. That night, I went to dinner with a woman named Sarah, whom I'd been seeing for about a month. She was a teacher, funny and kind, and completely unimpressed by wealth or status. We talked about books and podcasts and the weird politics of her school's faculty lounge. We laughed. We held hands across the table, and when she asked, "You seem lighter lately. Did something change?" I told her about the divorce being finalized. "How do you feel?" "Yeah," she asked. "Free," I said, and realized it was true. The message came 3 months after the divorce was finalized. A text from an unknown number. "It's Elena, can we talk?" I stared at the message for a long time. My first instinct was to delete it, block the number, maintain the clean break I'd worked so hard to achieve. But curiosity won out. "About what?" I replied. "I need to apologize, really apologize. Can we meet?" We met at a coffee shop, not one of our old haunts, but a new place in a neighborhood neither of us had lived in. Neutral territory. Elena looked different, older somehow. Her hair was shorter, styled differently. She'd lost weight. But more than that, she had a quality I couldn't quite name, a kind of brittleness, like glass that had been cracked and badly glued back together. Thank you for meeting me, she said. I almost didn't. I wouldn't have blamed you. We ordered drinks, made small talk about the weather, the neighborhood, anything to delay the real conversation. Finally, Elena took a breath and said, I'm sorry for everything, for how I treated you, for the jokes and the comparisons and the way I made you feel. You were right, I was cruel. And I didn't realize it until... She trailed off. Until what? I prompted. Until Marcus started doing it to me? There it was. The thing I'd warned them both about. The pattern I'd seen coming. Tell me, I said. So she did. In halting, embarrassed fragments, Elena described the last few months with Marcus. How exciting it had been at first. The validation of being chosen. The thrill of finally being with the man she'd fantasized about. But then the cracks started showing. Marcus's expectations, his subtle criticisms, the way he'd compare her to ex-girlfriends or colleagues, or the idealized version of her he'd built in his head. The way he'd make jokes about her job, less prestigious than his, her apartment, smaller than his house, her friends, less successful than his network. He does this thing, Elena said, and her voice cracked slightly, where he'll say something really cutting, and then when I react, he'll tell me I'm being too sensitive, that he's just being honest, that I should be able to handle a little teasing. I said nothing, just waited. And I realized, she continued, that's what I did to you for months. I made you feel like your feelings were wrong, like your hurt was a character flaw. I did to you exactly what Marcus is doing to me. And now you understand, I said quietly. Now I understand, and I'm sorry, and I'm so, so sorry. We sat in silence for a while. Then I asked, are you still with him? Yes, but I don't know for how much longer. It's not what I thought it would be. It never is. How did you know that it would be like this? Because, I said, people who need external validation never stop needing it. Marcus needed you to validate his desirability, his worth, his place in the social hierarchy. And you needed him to validate your choice to leave me. But now you're in it, and the fantasy is becoming reality, and reality includes his insecurities and his need to feel superior and all the human flaws that don't fit the idealized image. Elena nodded, tears forming. I threw away our marriage for this. Yes, you did. Can I ask you something? Do you think you'll ever forgive me? I thought about that, about forgiveness and what it means and whether it's something you give to someone else or something you do for yourself. I already have, I said. Not because you asked or because you apologized, but because holding on to anger was hurting me more than it was hurting you. So I let it go. I forgave you. But Elena, forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. I forgive you, and I hope you find happiness. But we're not getting back together. That door's closed. I know, she said quietly, and I wasn't asking for that. I needed you to know that I understand now, what I did, how it felt. Then I hope that understanding makes you better for the next person. After Marcus, there might not be a next person. There will be, and when there is, I hope you treat them the way I deserve to be treated, the way everyone deserves to be treated. We finished our coffee, hugged awkwardly at the door, and then I watched her walk away down the street toward whatever life she was building or destroying, and I went back to mine. 2 years after my divorce was finalized, I married Sarah. It was a small ceremony. Immediate family, close friends, the people who'd been there through the bad times and stuck around for the good. We got married at a vineyard upstate on a perfect October afternoon when the leaves were turning and the air smelled like wood smoke and possibility. My brother was my best man. Marcus was not invited. During the reception, while I was dancing with Sarah to some song she'd chosen that I pretended to know, I saw my phone light up with a text. I almost ignored it. This was my wedding day, after all, not the time to be checking messages. But something made me look. It was from Monica, Elena's sister. Congratulations on your wedding. I saw the photos. You look happy, really happy. Elena and Marcus broke up, by the way. Thought you should know. I showed the text to Sarah. She read it and looked up at me. How do you feel? I thought about it, about Elena and Marcus, and the affair that wasn't an affair, and the marriage that ended, and the life I'd built from the rubble. I feel sorry for them, I said. But mostly, I feel grateful. For what? For everything that happened, because if it hadn't, I wouldn't be here, with you, living this life. Sarah smiled. That's very evolved of you. Or just very relieved to be out of that situation. Probably both. We kept dancing. The song ended, another started. And somewhere in New York, Elena and Marcus were dealing with their own consequences, their own patterns, their own realizations that the grass isn't actually greener. It's just different grass with different weeds. But that was their story now. This was mine. If you've read this far, you might be wondering what the moral is, what the lesson is supposed to be. Whether this story is about revenge or justice or just the slow, grinding work of extracting yourself from a toxic situation. I think it's about all of those things. But mostly, it's about this. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is call someone's bluff. Elena made jokes about leaving me for Marcus for months, and every time she did, I smiled and nodded and pretended it didn't hurt, because I thought that was what marriage meant: enduring, accepting, making space for the other person's worst impulses. But marriage shouldn't require you to shrink yourself. It shouldn't require you to accept cruelty disguised as humor. It shouldn't require you to compete for affection or prove your worth on a daily basis. When I handed Elena her bag and told her to go, I wasn't being cruel. I wasn't being vindictive. I was simply saying, I hear you, I believe you, if you want to leave, leave, but stop pretending this is a joke. And the moment it stopped being a joke, the moment it became a real choice with real consequences, everything changed. Because fantasy and reality are different things. The imagined life with Marcus, where everything was perfect and easy and validated her every choice, wasn't the same as the actual life with Marcus, where his insecurities and needs were just as present as mine had been. She learned that lesson the hard way. Marcus learned it too, and I learned the most important lesson of all, that I deserve better. That being enough for someone shouldn't require me to be perfect. That love, real love, doesn't keep score or make comparisons or use humor as a weapon. I'm writing this from my home office in the house Sarah and I bought in Connecticut. It's not palatial. It doesn't have 6-burner stoves or home theaters or architectural features that belong in magazines. But it's ours, and it's filled with laughter and warmth and the kind of quiet contentment that doesn't make for dramatic stories, but makes for a good life. I still freelance, but I've built it into something stable, enough to pay the mortgage and save for retirement and take Sarah on actual vacations instead of just dreaming about them. She still teaches, and she loves it. And we have conversations about her students and my clients and the dog we adopted who has no sense of personal space. I don't think about Elena much anymore. Occasionally, I'll see her on social media. She's dating someone new, some guy who seems nice enough, though I don't look close enough to judge. I hope she's happy. I hope she learned from what happened. I hope she's treating this new person better than she treated me. And Marcus, I haven't spoken to him since that day in my old apartment. Mutual friends tell me he's still single, still throwing dinner parties, still buying boats and cabins and all the trappings of success. I don't wish him ill, but I don't miss him either. Because here's the final truth, the one I want you to take away from this. You cannot love someone into treating you well. You cannot earn respect from someone who's determined to withhold it. You cannot make yourself small enough to fit into someone else's narrow definition of acceptable. All you can do is believe in your own worth. Set your boundaries. And when someone shows you who they are, through jokes, through comparisons, through the 1,000 small cuts that eventually add up to a mortal wound, believe them. And if necessary, pack their bag and tell them, do it now. Because sometimes the only way to save yourself is to let someone else go. Even especially when that someone is the person you thought you'd spend your life with. I let Elena go. I closed that door. And on the other side, I found something I'd been missing for years: peace, self-respect, and a life where being myself just as I am was enough. If you're in a relationship where you're constantly made to feel insufficient, where jokes cut deeper than laughter should reach, where you're being compared to some impossible standard, I want you to know this: you deserve better. You deserve someone who loves you as you are, not as they wish you would be. You deserve a partner who builds you up instead of tearing you down. You deserve kindness, respect, the kind of love that doesn't require you to prove your worth on a daily basis. And if you're not getting those things, if you're living in the emotional wasteland I lived in for those months, then maybe it's time to pack someone's bag, to call their bluff, to say, with all the calm dignity you can muster, do it now. Because on the other side of that moment, past the fear and the grief and the uncertainty, is a life where you matter, where you're enough, where jokes are actually funny and love is actually loving. That life exists. I found it. And you can too. But first, you have to let go of the life that's killing you. You have to close the door on the person who doesn't value you. You have to believe that you're worth fighting for, even if that fight means walking away. So if you're reading this and you're in that place I was in, that place where every day feels like a test you're failing, I want you to remember you're not failing. The relationship is failing, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is acknowledge that and move on. Pack the bag, open the door, and let them go. Your future self will thank you.